All right, here we go. It's time to do one of the videos that I think everybody loves arguing about the most, a top 25 ranking. Now, I only do 3 of these each offseason. I do one after signing day in February, one after spring practice and all the spring games are completed in April, and a final one that I'm doing now a couple of weeks before the season starts. I do those 3 because, honestly, my opinions change about a lot of these teams after each of those things occurs, right? After the signing day in February, you have a pretty good idea of what the roster is going to look like the following year. By the end of spring games, you've seen what that team might actually be able to do. Plus, you've had a lot of transfers and things like that. And then, of course, now, 3 weeks before the season starts, the rosters are pretty much established. You know who the starting quarterback is going to be for almost every single team, although there are a few teams on this list here who the quarterback situation is still a little bit up in the air, or at least some teams or coaches have not officially announced who a starting quarterback might be. But for the most part, you have a pretty good idea by this point every summer what the teams are going to be, the rosters, the coaching staffs, who's starting where, things like that. Let's do it. All right, I'm going to do this similar to the way I've done my top 25 ranking videos in the past. I'm going to go 25 through 11 and then 10 through 1. With teams 25 through 11, I'm not going to talk a lot about every single team. But teams 10 through 1, I'll do my best to explain to you why I have each team ranked where I do, why certain teams are above or below other teams. If I did it that in-depth for all 25 teams, the video would be 2 or 3 hours long, and that would just be pointless. But good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Also in addition to that as well, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I post college football videos year-round, almost every single day, and some of them are even watchable. I don't know about this one. You can let me know in the comments down below after you watch it how watchable or unwatchable this one was. I guess that will probably depend on how much you agree or disagree with my top 25 ranking. Some interesting facts about my current top 25. The SEC has the most teams represented with 7. Second place, and a little surprising to me after I went through and added it up, but the conference with the second most amount of teams represented in my top 25, not the Big Ten, which is who I kind of would have assumed going in. It's actually the ACC. The Big Ten has, the ACC's got 5 teams. The Big Ten has 4 teams, as does the Big 12. And the Pac-12 has 3 teams represented in my current top 25 ranking. And that leaves room for 2 teams left over. So those will either be independents or group of 5s. We'll figure it out as we go on through here. One other thing that's a little bit interesting, and some of you might want to click off right now as soon as I say this, I don't have a single team from the Big Ten West in my top 25 ranking. A lot of you watch my prediction videos that I do. I start those in June. I'm still currently doing them now. And if you've been watching those, you know I've done Wisconsin already. I have Wisconsin at 7-5. And they might be one of the best teams in the Big Ten West. Nebraska is a little bit of a wild card. I do think they'll be a lot better than last year, but I don't think Nebraska deserves to be put into a top 25 at this point in the year. And Iowa seems like a borderline top 25 team to me. I would have all 3 of those teams in my others receiving votes, like you see in the coaches in the AP poll, the teams that don't quite make the top 25. I also have some other teams that were very close to getting into the top 25, like Houston, Cincinnati, Central Florida. These are all teams that I think could potentially finish in the top 25, but I just couldn't find room to put them in the preseason ranking that I'm doing today. These other teams that I have in here, I just feel like are more deserving, at least for right now. One other note about my top 25 rankings. I changed these rankings around a lot during the first couple of weeks of the season. We don't really know much about these teams right now other than what we saw people do last year, who they lost from last year, and any coaching changes that may or may not have happened. I shuffle these teams around quite a bit in weeks 1 through 3 or 4, and then it starts to get a little bit more steady after that. So if you're not happy with where a particular team happens to be ranked, well, don't worry. If they do what they're supposed to do and they look impressive in the first couple of weeks of the season, I'll move them up in the poll. If you think I've got somebody ranked a little bit too high and maybe they struggle early in the season, drop a game or 2, or maybe they barely win a couple of games that you thought were going to be blowouts, don't worry. I will drop them down in my rankings. I don't wait for a team to lose to drop them down in my rankings. If a team is favored by 20 and wins by 3, to me, that's not a very impressive win, depending on the game, of course. So I will move teams up and down quite a bit during the first couple of weeks of the season. But this is going to be my top 25 from now until the start of the season, which will be week 0. During the season, I update my top 25 ranking every single Monday right here on this channel. All right, here we go. Let's start with teams 25 through 21. Here they are: Arkansas, Penn State, Michigan State, Tennessee, and BYU. Just a couple of things about a few of these teams here. BYU is going to be a really good team this year. They won 9 or 10 games last year and the year before. They have a ton coming back, particularly on offense, but they've got a really tough schedule. Now, to BYU's credit, they have a tough schedule almost every single year. Last year, they beat 5 Pac-12 teams, so it's not like they're running around playing a bunch of group of fives. They're considered a Power 5 team by the majority of conferences for scheduling purposes. They're moving into the Big 12 next year. I think they're going to have a really good team this year and potentially could finish in the top 15 and maybe even in the top 10. If BYU were to somehow go undefeated, just look at their schedule. If BYU were to go undefeated, they're going to be in the playoffs. I'm not saying they will go undefeated, but if you think I got BYU too low at 21, don't worry. If they win a bunch of games, I'll move them up. They've got some tough opponents early in the year. If they lose those games, I'll probably bump them down. Tennessee at 22. I think Tennessee's going to finish ranked much higher than 22. However, it's been a long time since I've seen Tennessee really do anything that mattered, right? I think Tennessee should be a top 15 team this year and should finish in the top 15. If that's true, they'll beat Florida in week 4. They'll beat Pitt on the road in week 2. And they'll be 4-0 heading into October when they have to go on the road and play LSU the week before hosting Alabama at home. That's their first 6 games. If they're 4-0, they're going to be a lot higher in my ranking than 22. But I feel like given the last 15 years or so of what we've seen from Tennessee and the fact that even though I do think they had a good year last year, the reality is they went 7-5 in the regular season, 7-6 after a bowl loss. This is what it is type of deal. I feel like 22 is pretty fair for Tennessee, although I will admit if they go 9-3 or 10-2, which I think they can do, clearly they will finish much higher. I have Arkansas at 25, just an absolutely brutal schedule. Arkansas is probably going to be a better team than they were last year. I know they lost that wide receiver, but they bring in Jaden Hazelwood from Oklahoma. They still have KJ Jefferson at quarterback. I like Arkansas. Schedule is brutal. They got to play, of course, everybody in the SEC West. They also host South Carolina from the East, and they have non-con games against Cincinnati and BYU. Arkansas could be a really good team that goes 7-5. I've got them coming in number 25 in the first poll. Penn State fell apart second half of the year last year. Did not look good after quarterback Sean Clifford got injured. First half of the year, they looked really good. They were ranked in the top 10 during the first half of the season. Sean Clifford got hurt, and it all fell apart after that for Penn State. If Penn State plays the entire year like they played the first half of the year last year, they're going to finish in the top 10 or the top 15. The Big Ten East is a brutal division with Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State. But Penn State is in there, or at least in that mix with those teams, I think. And you see I've got Michigan State right above them there at 23. Losing Kenneth Walker, I think, is a big deal. Not to mention the fact they had one of the worst pass defenses I've ever seen in my entire life last year. I know they had a really good year. I don't think Michigan State can repeat the season they had last year. I think they're a borderline top 25-ish type team this year. An 8-4 type of season would be my guess. So that's sort of just my brief thoughts there, 25 through 21. 20 through 16, Pitt, Oklahoma State, Wake Forest, Kentucky, and Ole Miss. Pitt, of course, won the ACC championship game last year with Kenny Pickett, right? But he's gone. Not only that, they lose Jordan Atkinson, the Blitnikoff Award winner from last year. More touchdown catches last year than any other receiver, one short of the record all time, actually. They take a step back this year, in my opinion. I know they brought Keaton Slovis in, the guy from Southern Cal, which is great. It gives you a quarterback with experience. You're not repeating what you did last year with Kenny Pickett and Jordan Atkinson or Addison, and both of those guys are gone. It's just not happening. I think Pitt, again, borderline top 25-ish type team. Oklahoma State, top 5 defense in America last year, lost about half the starters, plus the defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles. They do get the quarterback back, but the running back is gone. I have some questions about Oklahoma State's ability to have as good of a year as they had last year where they played for the Big 12 title, but I do think they're a top 25 team. Wake Forest going to score 60 or 70 points a game again this year, but the defense, absolutely horrendous. As bad as Clemson's offense was last year, Clemson beat Wake Forest. I mean, just the Wake Forest defense just couldn't stop anything at all. I think they're a top 25 team, but not much higher than 20-ish or so. So got them at 18. Kentucky's hard for me to figure out. I'll be honest. I could see Kentucky going 10-2. I really could. They host Georgia late in the year, and if they were to somehow win that game, I think if they're good enough to beat Georgia at home late in the year, they're obviously going to go about 10-2 and finish ranked much higher than this. And this ranking isn't necessarily where I think these teams are going to finish, more of where I feel like they deserve maybe to be ranked. Now, it feels like the next step for me with Kentucky is not necessarily winning the SEC East. I feel like they're still too far behind Georgia to accomplish that this season. The problem with Kentucky and Georgia, it's a mismatch in terms of philosophies. Kentucky, you have to be able to spread the ball around, really, if you want to beat Georgia. You can't run on Georgia. No one's ran on Georgia in 5 years. And Kentucky just has not shown the ability to be able to spread the ball around and throw consistently enough. I do like Will Levis, and I think he's an NFL quarterback, so I don't know if it's the pieces around him. I don't know if it's the offensive game plan or what he is, because he doesn't put up huge numbers, although I think he's a really good quarterback. So I could see Kentucky finishing in the top 15. The next step should be for Kentucky to try to make a New Year's Six game. In order to do that, they probably need to go 10-2. Not sure they can go 10-2, maybe 9-3. Maybe even 8-4, though. We'll see. A lot's going to depend on the Kentucky versus Florida game. They also have to play Tennessee. And even in Tennessee's down years, they found a way to beat Kentucky almost every single year. That's going to be two key games to me for Kentucky, the Florida and the Tennessee game. If they win both those games, I could see Kentucky going 9-10 wins. If they lose both those games, they're probably looking at 8-4. I've got them at 17. And Ole Miss, again, lost the quarterback. Bring in Jackson Dart. I do like Zach Evans, the running back they picked up in the transfer portal, and I think Ole Miss is going to have one of the best offenses in the SEC again this coming season. We'll see if the defense can take another step forward or two. To be fair, I do have Ole Miss beating Alabama this season. I've done an Alabama prediction video already. I have them at 11-1 with a loss to Ole Miss. It's not because I think Ole Miss is necessarily better than Alabama or has a chance to win the West or anything like that, because I don't. It's more just a reflection of where the game falls on the schedule for Alabama. They have to play LSU the week before. That's going to be a tough physical game. Maybe they're a little beat up, and Ole Miss sneaks up on them. But anyway, so I think Ole Miss is going to have a decent season. I don't know that they'll win 10 games like they did last year, but they seem like a middle of the top 25-ish type of team to me. Okay, 15-11. I've got Oklahoma, Texas, Southern Cal, Miami, and NC State. And I have a feeling this is going to be the most controversial set of 5 teams that you see on my thing here. The Oklahoma fans are going to be huge mad because I've got not only Texas ranked ahead of them, but I've got Southern Cal ranked ahead of them, right? The Texas fans are going to be mad because I got Southern Cal ranked ahead of them, and Miami. Miami's going to be mad because I got NC State ranked ahead of them. This was a hard group of teams for me to kind of figure out. I think every team in this 11 through 15 range has the ability to finish in the top 10 this season. They're not all going to finish in the top 10, of course, but I do think there's going to be a team or two out of this 11 through 15 that has a really good year and finishes in the top 10. I'm really high on Miami this year. I've already done my record prediction for Miami. You can go back and watch it if you want. I've got Miami going 10-2 in the regular season, winning their division, and getting a rematch against Clemson in the ACC title game. If that happens, they'll be in the top 10, right? Texas, it seems like it's going to be the year for Texas almost every single year. If Quinn Ewers, and this is a big if because we've never seen him play, if Quinn Ewers has a good year as quarterback at Texas, I think Texas is a team that could also go somewhere around 10-2. I haven't done a prediction for them yet, but they've got the ability to do it. Obviously, the defense is going to have to play a lot better too, and you can't lose to Kansas. You got to stop doing that. My issue with Oklahoma is you just lost so much talent to the draft and the transfer portal, both your quarterbacks, 2 of your wide receivers. You lost your head coach, who was I mean, he was the mastermind of that Oklahoma offense. All of that's gone. I love Brent Venables, and there's no doubt in my mind that over the next 5 years, Oklahoma's defense is going to be infinitely better than anything we saw under Lincoln Riley, which was absolutely horrible. I do question how much of a difference defensively Brent Venables can make in 1 year. The offense has been the only thing keeping Oklahoma's head above water in the Big 12 the last few years under Lincoln Riley, because the defense has just been that bad. I like the quarterback they brought in from Central Florida, and I like that they brought the coach with him, Lebby. I just have questions about Oklahoma's ability to get to 10 wins this year. They seem like a 9-3 type of team to me. Now, I could be wrong. The Big 12 is not exactly loaded with world beaters, but I do think Baylor is going to be good again this year. I don't think Oklahoma State will be an easy out. Texas. There are some definite landmines on the schedule for Oklahoma this year, not to mention a road trip to Nebraska to take on the Cornhuskers, who, don't forget, almost beat Oklahoma early in the season last year. So that's the best I can do to explain to you why I've got these teams ranked where I do. Southern Cal's got basically Oklahoma's offense from last year, plus Jordan Addison, the best wide receiver in America who transferred in from Pitt, plus Travis Dye, one of the best running backs in the Pac-12 last year who transferred in from Oregon, plus a handful of defensive transfers from around the country. And the Pac-12 is just not very good. I mean, outside of Utah and Oregon, is there a better team in the Pac-12 than Southern Cal? Hard to find one. Maybe UCLA has another jump after going 8-4 last year. Maybe Arizona State finally figures it out. But other than that, there's just not a lot of hurdles to get over in the Pac-12. I feel like the path is easier for Southern Cal to finish in the top 12 or 13 than it is for either Texas or Oklahoma. That's why I've got them ranked the way I do. I've got NC State ahead of Miami because NC State's defense is absolutely unbelievable. They get almost everybody back from the second-best defense in the ACC last year. The quarterback comes back on offense. I think NC State's going to have a really good year. And even though I think Miami's going to have a really good year too, I have more questions right now about Miami than I do NC State, with Miami most notably, where's the playmaking wide receivers and how's the defense going to look. So that's my explanation for that. All right, 10 through 1. Here we go. Coming in at number 10, I've got Oregon. Oregon's won the Pac-12 2 of the last 3 years, played in the Pac-12 title game 3 years in a row, I believe. They do have a brand new coaching staff. They did lose that running back to the transfer portal, and they have one of the toughest opening games of anybody in America, having to travel all the way to Atlanta to play Georgia, the defending national champions, in week 1. That's got nothing to do with the Pac-12. I still think Oregon will find their way into the Pac-12 title game this year, playing probably either Utah or Southern Cal in that Pac-12 title game. It's hard to find more than 2 losses on Oregon's schedule when you look. Now, the problem with Oregon, at least under Mario Cristobal, wasn't necessarily winning the big games. Of course, they beat Ohio State on the road last year. They've won the Pac-12, right? They've won bowl games. They did get blown out by Utah twice. Oregon's got to stop losing games every single year that they got no business losing. It just seems like they do it every single year. They did it last year. And a couple of years ago, they were cruising towards the playoffs in like week 11 and lost a crazy game on like a Friday night to an average Arizona or Arizona State team, whichever it was. Got to stop doing that. But I do think Oregon's got top 10 talent. They've got 2 of the best linebackers in the country. The defense should be pretty good this year, especially along the line of scrimmage on defense and at linebacker. I do have some questions, of course, about a new coaching staff. They bring Bo Nix in to play quarterback, and I'm not the biggest Bo Nix fan on planet Earth. I still think Oregon finds a way to win 9, possibly 10 games and plays their way into the Pac-12 title game, which the Pac-12 has done away with divisions this year, so it's just 2 best teams playing for the title. I could definitely see Oregon finishing in the top 10. Number 9, I've got Baylor. I love Dave Aranda. What he's done at Baylor in a short period of time is absolutely amazing. They get that quarterback Shapen back, who didn't play the majority of the year last year, but he played at the end of the year, and he was unbelievable. He was so good that the starting quarterback transferred out. So he's the guy this year. I trust Dave Aranda. Now, they did lose some pieces from last year. They're going to have to find ways to run the ball this year. And it's not that I don't have any questions about Baylor, but to me, I think they're the best team in the Big 12. I've got them ranked higher than Oklahoma, higher than Oklahoma State, higher than Texas. They're my highest ranked Big 12 team. A lot of that is because of my faith in Dave Aranda. I've got Baylor at 9. They've got a tough game early in the year on the road at BYU. I think that game will go a long way to telling us how good of a team in 2022 Baylor actually is. At number 8, I've got Texas A&M. I struggled on this one. I've had Texas A&M. I thought about putting them as high as 4. If you just go off of roster talent, they're probably the 4th most talented team in this top 10, just based on roster talent. But I've got serious questions, again, at the quarterback position. Their defense has been amazing under Jimbo Fisher the last couple of years, but the offense has really, really struggled. And if you look at the big games they have won, which haven't been a lot, they beat Alabama last year at home, right? How'd they do it? Well, the quarterback played the game of his life. If Jimbo Fisher can get consistently good play from the quarterback position, there's no reason to think that Texas A&M can't finish the season in the top 10 and possibly even 10-2, 11-1, something like that. If they beat Bama, all bets are off. They could go 12-0. That game comes around the middle of October. Obviously, that's a game everybody's looking forward to this year because of the sort of feud between Jimbo and Saban that we had in the offseason around recruiting and name, image, and likeness. and things like that. But Texas A&M's been a strange team. Again, they recruit in the top 10, top 5 every single year. Last year, signed the #1 class. Not that, I don't think that class is going to help them all that much this year. Not very many freshmen play significant roles at big-time programs. You have 1 or 2 plug in a spot here or there. But generally speaking, that class they just signed is going to help them more next year and the year after than it is this coming year. But again, that class gets all the attention, that #1 class. But go back and look at the recruiting rankings for Texas A&M over the last 2, 3, 4 years, which is what makes up the majority of their roster today. It's in the top 5, top 10, top 6, top 7 almost every single year. They've got a ton of talent. If they can put it together, they'll win 10, 11 or more games. There's no doubt about it. Of course, famously, they sort of lose 4 games a year. That's the running joke. Since joining the SEC 10 years ago, they've lost 4 games or more, 8 of those 10 years. 1 year with Johnny Manziel, they didn't lose 4. And the COVID year, 2020, they only had the 1 loss. Other than that, they've lost 4 or more games every single year. Got to get over that hump. The pressure's starting to mount on Jimbo. They're paying him a boatload of money, and they're not paying him to lose 4 games a year. It's time to sort of put up or shut up there. Again, I think it purely comes down to the quarterback play. Who do they choose to play quarterback? That's one of the schools on this list where the quarterback question is kind of still up in the air depending on who you talk to, but I've got Texas A&M at 8. I got Michigan at 7. This is another one that was hard for me. I do feel like teams deserve a certain amount of respect when they make the playoffs, and clearly Michigan was a great team last year, 11-1 in the regular season, beating Ohio State at the end of the year to win the division, then winning the Big Ten title, making the playoffs before losing to Georgia. And everybody focuses on the Hutchinson guy that they lost on defense. They lost a lot more than that on defense, though, and they lost their top 2 running backs from last year. Now, I love their running back situation this year. I think Michigan's going to be a great running team this year offensively, regardless of who they go with at quarterback. And this is another team here where you've got McCarthy and McNamara. The fan base is split, half like one, half like the other. Last year, Harbaugh seemed to kind of have a hard time sort of just landing on one. They both played in almost every single game. We'll see how they handle the quarterback situation this year. I'm kind of surprised Harbaugh was able to keep both of those quarterbacks during the offseason without one of them transferring out, especially considering the fact that Jim Harbaugh himself tried to transfer out in the offseason, tried to transfer to the NFL. Unfortunately, the NFL didn't want him. So, he ran back to Michigan, the whole dog returning to his vomit deal. But anyway, Michigan, I do not think Michigan's going to be as good as they were last year. I don't think they're going to win their division. I don't think they're going to beat Ohio State. But when you look at their schedule, their non-con is a joke. They don't play a single Power 5 team in their non-con, so that's 3 guaranteed wins. And I don't see them losing 3 of the remaining 9 games. So Michigan looks like around a 10-2-ish type of team to me. And if that's the case, they're probably going to be in the top 10. I've got them at number 7. Notre Dame, I've got at 6. Notre Dame, Clemson, and Utah, to me, those are probably the 3 teams that should be considered for the 4 spot. Obviously, I went with Utah at 4, Clemson at 5, and Notre Dame at 6. We'll start with Notre Dame. They got a tough schedule. Brand new coaching staff. Marcus Freeman, guy's never coached a game in his life outside of the bowl game last year that he coached after Brian Kelly announced he was leaving for LSU. It's going to be interesting to see how he handles the role of head coach. Some coordinators or position coaches are able to make the leap to head coach and not skip a beat. Other coaches, it takes them a year or 2, and some just never get it, right? Will Muschamp. So we'll see. Now, Notre Dame is talented, especially along the lines of scrimmage. They've got one of the best tight ends in all of America. I like their defensive front 7. Notre Dame is going to have the same issues, in my opinion, this year that they had almost every single year under Brian Kelly, and that's skill position players. Where are the elite wide receivers? Where are the elite DBs? Notre Dame plays Ohio State week 1. Where are the DBs that are going to match up with Ohio State's wide receivers? Now, I realize that Ohio State's got the best group of wide receivers on planet Earth, and that there's a lot of teams who would have a hard time containing that. But Notre Dame has just had a hard time recruiting the elite skill position players at wide receiver and DB. And even their quarterback play, in my opinion, has been average at best. Names like Ian Book and You go on down the list, you don't really see a name that kind of jumps out at you. So I think Notre Dame, to me, seems about like the same Notre Dame team we've seen over the last couple of years. A really good team. You look at the schedule, though. Trips to Southern Cal, hosting Clemson, a trip, I believe, to North Carolina. There are some difficult games on Notre Dame's schedule. I don't see Notre Dame going 12-0. I've already done my prediction video for Notre Dame. I believe I had them at 10-2, if I remember correctly. And you know my thoughts on Notre Dame. If Notre Dame wants to choose to remain independent, skipping a 13th game, which would be a conference championship game, I feel like Notre Dame has to go 12-0 to make the playoffs. I personally would never put in an 11-1 Notre Dame. I don't care who their loss was to or who their wins were against. Now, the playoff committee has never come out and said anything like that, but the only times Notre Dame has ever gotten into the playoffs is when they were either 12-0 or the one year they were actually in the ACC, they got in with the one loss. So I don't think Notre Dame's a playoff team, which is why I ended up not putting them at 4. I've got them at 6. I've got Clemson at 5. I am not one of these people who are ready to just ship Clemson off to the trash heap. I have heard all offseason about how Clemson's run is over, Clemson's dominance of the ACC is over, Clemson's trips to the playoffs are over, their offense is dead, Dabo's lost it, the coordinators are gone, their quarterback situation is terrible. Some of those things are true. Some, I think, are serious overreaction. Clemson is still the most talented team in the ACC by far. Now, I think that's going to change really quick with Mario Cristobal and company running things down in Miami. I think the recruiting is about to go through the roof down there. But right now, Clemson is still head and shoulders the best team in the ACC. And if they get the quarterback situation figured out, they're a playoff team again this year. Their defense is one of, if not the best in the country. I definitely think they have the best defensive line in the country. You can make the argument they've got the best front seven in the country. If there's any question mark at all about Clemson's defense, it would be the secondary. They lost a couple of guys to the NFL, most notably Andrew Booth, who was basically a shutdown corner for them last year. And offensively, I like what they have. They've got some issues along the offensive line. It's got to play a lot better than it did last year, but you could say the same thing about Alabama. Alabama's offensive line didn't play great last year, and they nearly won the national title. The biggest difference between Clemson and Alabama last year was quarterback play. Alabama had a Heisman-winning quarterback. Clemson had a quarterback that couldn't complete a pass. DJ Uiagalelei, or for short, the ukulele. The guy was absolutely horrible. I think he had 9 touchdowns and 10 turnovers on the season. Obviously, if that happens again, not only is Clemson not going to finish 5th, they're not going to win their division, the ACC, make a playoff, or probably even a New Year's Six game. They've got to play a lot better offensively than they did last year. That's stating the obvious. I saw Clemson basically dominate college football for 6 years. Outside of maybe Alabama, Clemson had hands down the best program in all of college football, not for 1 year, not for 2 years, but for a 5 or 6 year period. Clemson was every bit as good as anyone else in the country. They won the ACC 6 years in a row, made the playoffs 6 years in a row. Last year was the first year they didn't make it. Now all of a sudden people want to throw them away. How confident am I that Clemson's quarterback situation will drastically improve this year? 50-50. But if it does, everything else is there. They've got Ngata at wide receiver. They've got Will Shipley at running back. The offensive line needs to play better. And either the ukulele has to play like people think he can, or Dabo is going to have to pull the trigger again like he did in 2018, benching veteran Kelly Bryant for Trevor Lawrence. He'll have to do that again this year and put in the young kid, Klubnik or whatever his name is. We'll see what happens. But I would caution against betting against Clemson. To me, it's more likely that their offense is vastly improved this year than it is that they go 9-3. So, and if the offense is improved, they're going to go 11-1 or 12-0. So I've got them at 5. At 4, I've got Utah. Utah's been one of the most consistently good teams in the country over the last few years. Obviously, I love their coaching staff. Everybody does. They're one of these teams that, and you hear these cliches all the time, but it feels like they were invented for Utah, right? They get the most out of the available talent they have. They don't recruit in the top 5. They don't recruit in the top 10. They don't even recruit in the top 20. But somehow they keep finishing in the top 20. And they haven't even been a Power 5 team for very long, about 10 years. beat Oregon twice last year, nearly beat Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, get a ton back offensively. They've got a big opening weekend game at Florida. And I feel like people are doubting Utah in that game mainly because of SEC and Pac-12 perception, right? Whether it's true or not, the perception is that the SEC is just so much better than the Pac-12. And while I agree with that in general, obviously, it doesn't mean that every single SEC team could beat every single Pac-12 team. I mean, it's just not what that means. To me, this game looks a lot like last year's game between LSU and UCLA. Now, of course, that game was played at UCLA, and that does make a difference, and I get that. But no one gave UCLA a chance to win that game, and what did they do? They won the game. Utah is favored in this game against Florida, but last time I checked, it was only by 1.5 points. So people are just not big believers in Utah. If you look at what Utah did last year and what Florida did last year and what they have coming back, Utah's got a stable coaching staff. Florida's got a brand new coaching staff. There would be no reason for anybody to give Florida a chance in this game, yet obviously a ton of people are because Utah's only favored by 1.5. I do think it matters that this game is in Gainesville, in Florida, in the first weekend of September, when the actual temperature is probably going to be somewhere around 98 degrees. The humidity is going to be somewhere around 100%. The heat index is going to be somewhere around 110. I do think that matters. Will it matter enough for Florida to beat Utah? Utah's got to win this game. If Utah loses this game week 1 to a middle of the road Florida team, I don't care whether you love Florida, hate Florida, have no interest in the SEC, or love the SEC, whatever. You can easily name 5 or 6 teams right now in the SEC that are clearly better than Florida. Clearly, right? Utah is the projected favorite in the Pac-12. If the Pac-12 favorite can't beat a team that's projected to be the 6th, 7th, 8th best team in the SEC, that's pitiful. So we'll see. Now, if Utah loses this game to Florida, not only are they going to not be ranked 4 in my ranking anymore, they won't be anywhere near the top 10 if they can't beat this Florida team. So we'll see. But based on what they've done recently, what they have coming back, I feel like this is a deserved ranking for Utah. If you have Clemson there, I've got no problem with Clemson at 4. I've got no problem with Notre Dame at 4. If you want to put Texas A&M at 4, I guess I don't necessarily have a problem with that either. But this is how I ended up in my ranking, Utah at 4. And then obviously my top 3 has not changed. I've got Ohio State at 1, Bama at 2, and Georgia at 3. The only thing I really feel like I need to explain is why I have Ohio State 1 and Bama 2 instead of the other way around. First of all, anybody that has a top 25 that doesn't have these 3 teams in some order in the top 3, I'm not taking you seriously. In my opinion, these 3 teams, Ohio State, Bama, and UJ, have clearly elevated themselves above the rest of the country, at least for right now, based on recruiting, based on season records, based on whatever you want to look at, coaching staffs, whatever. To me, these teams clearly deserve to be ranked 1, 2, and 3 in some particular order. I've got Ohio State ahead of Bama for a couple of different reasons. Number one, I think Ohio State's going to have the best offense in the country in 2022. I think they have a Heisman candidate at all 3 skill positions offensively. Obviously, C.J. Stroud at quarterback. Pick a wide receiver, right? They have 5 NFL wide receivers. Just pick one of them, Heisman candidate. And Travion Henderson at running back might be the 2nd best running back in the country, only behind Texas' Bijan Robinson. He's really, really good home run hitter. The guy can get 90-yard touchdown every time he touches the ball. He's got that type of home run potential. I think they're going to have the best offense in America. Defensively, I know they were bad last year, especially against the run, and that hurt them bad against Oregon and then Michigan later in the year. Ohio State, of course, lost their first game of the regular season to Oregon, lost the last game of the regular season to Michigan. You can blame both those losses, really, on the run defense. It's not an Oklahoma issue, though. Ohio State has a talented defense. It was a philosophy issue. It was a fundamentals issue. It was a game planning issue, in my opinion, at Ohio State, more so than a talent issue. Now, at Oklahoma, it was all of the above. They didn't have the defensive talent they needed. They had terrible philosophies. They didn't have any. It's not that the fundamentals were bad at Oklahoma. They didn't have any defensive fundamentals. Ohio State's problem, in my opinion, can be fixed, and I think they made the right move to fix it. They went out and got who they think is the best defensive coordinator in all of college football. He's definitely top 5. Look what he did at Oklahoma State, Jim Knowles. I think you see an impact immediately with Jim Knowles defensively at Ohio State. More so than Brent Venables at Oklahoma, because unlike Oklahoma, I think the talent is there at Ohio State defensively to have a top 20-ish, 25-ish defense. With Ohio State's offense, they don't need a top 5 defense. They don't. They can't have the 100th best defense against the run. They can't be as bad as they were last year, but it's not like they need to have a Georgia defense from last year in order to win the national title, not with that offense they have. I have less questions about Ohio State, in other words, than I do Alabama. Now, obviously, it's great that Alabama gets Bryce Young back, Heisman-winning quarterback from last year, and you can't deny the guy's talent. However, he lost his top 2 wide receivers, lost all of his running backs. Their offensive line was horrible last year, did not look any better in the spring game. Now, to be fair, it is just a spring game, and that offensive line was having to block Will Anderson and Dallas Turner. And there's not going to be very many offensive lines anywhere that are able to do that. So I do understand all that. And it's not that I'm saying Alabama is bad. I mean, for God's sakes, I've got them ranked number 2, and no one's going to be surprised if Alabama goes 15-0 and wins the national title this year. Their defense is unbelievable, one of the best probably since 2016 or 17 that Saban has had. Just an unbelievable defense, headlined, of course, by Will Anderson, who's probably the best college football player in the country. But as weird as it is to have a returning quarterback or a returning Heisman-winning QB, I still have a few questions about Alabama offensively. And if you look at them last year, in the games where that offensive line played really bad, they struggled not just to score, but to get first downs. You go back and look at the Auburn game. They didn't score a touchdown to the last play of the game against Auburn, and that was with healthy wide receivers and whatever other excuses they want to use about other games they lost. When that offensive line struggles and Bryce Young has to run around, that offense struggled, and that was with Williamson and Mechie. I like Jermaine Burton. I like Corey Brooks. I like the kid they brought in from Louisville. I do not think Alabama's got a receiving core like they had last year. I just don't. I also like Jahmyr Gibbs, the running back they brought in from Georgia Tech. However, he's 5'2" and 110 pounds. He's really, really good, but he can't run the ball 10 or 15 times a game between the tackles like you see running backs do in the SEC. He can't do that. He's a third down guy. He's a sweep guy. Not that they'll never run him on first or second down. Of course they will. But he's not Brian Robinson or Najee Harris or Derrick Henry or Mark Ingram. He's not that. They don't have that. And as good as Jahmyr Gibbs is in the return game with kicks and punts, I have questions about Alabama overall at the running back position, and I think their wide receivers are good. They're not as good as they were last year. None of that is to say, like I said, that means Alabama's going to be a bad team. That's just my explanation, or at least the best explanation I can give for having Ohio State ranked ahead of Bama. And I can see the comments now. This guy just hates Bama. Yeah, and I love Ohio State. I just love Ohio State. That's why I put them number 1. This is just how I feel the top 3 should be ranked. Look, if I just hated Bama, I'd have Georgia ahead of Bama. I don't. I've got Georgia at 3rd. The reason I've got Georgia 3rd and not 1st or 2nd is, well, they lost 5-6 starters off of that defense. We all know that, right? They lost their best wide receiver to the transfer portal, Jermaine Burton. They lost their top 2 running backs, Zamir White, Zeus, and James Cook, right? Now, Georgia's not hurting at the running back position. You got Kendall Milton and Kenny McIntosh back there. Dejon Edwards can fill in. True freshman Branson Robinson, I think, is going to be really, really good and will probably play this year. And even over on the defensive side, the only real question I have is that inside linebacker. Georgia returns both their outside linebackers, Nolan Smith and Robert Beal, right? They lose Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt, but Jalen Carter is back. And the only reason Jalen Carter wasn't starting last year is because there was 2 first-round NFL draft picks starting in front of him. He might be better than both of them. And that's not me being a Georgia fan. Read some articles. The guy is a first-round NFL pick if he doesn't play a down this year. He's that good. In the secondary, we get Keely Ringo back. We get Chris Smith back. We get Dan Jackson back. I think we'll be fine in the secondary. In fact, I think our secondary this season is going to be better than it was last season. The question is that inside linebacker, right? We lost our top 3 inside linebackers to the NFL draft, Channing Tindall, Quay Walker, and Nakobe Dean. There's talent. I mean, Georgia has recruited in the top 3, 6 years in a row, a couple of number 1 classes in there. There is plenty of talent at the inside linebacker position. What we don't have at the inside linebacker position is experience. And the only way to get that is to play, right? So we're going to find out about Georgia's inside linebackers pretty quick. Of course, they open up with Oregon, who I think is a top 10 team. Week 3, they go on the road and play South Carolina. So Georgia's going to have to hit the ground running both offensively and defensively. And, of course, quarterback Stetson Bennett, which, look, I'm not about to spend another year with the whole Georgia quarterback thing. Stetson Bennett is what he is. We all know that. He's starting until he dies or runs out of eligibility. That's just all there is to it, period. So whether you love him, hate him, or somewhere in between, he is what he is. So that's why I've got Georgia at 3 behind Bama and Ohio State. I think Ohio State, Bama, and UJ clearly the 3 best teams and should be ranked 1, 2, 3 in some order. 4 is up in the air, but there you go. That is my final top 25 ranking for the 2022 preseason. Let me know down below where you think I was right, and more importantly, where you think I was wrong. All right, until next time, y'all take it easy and have a good morning.